With the recent announcement of a Scott Pilgrim anime for Netflix, I thought now would be the perfect time to look at Scott Pilgrim vs. the world as a whole. In this video, I plan to talk about the graphic novels, the movie, and then the game, so take this as a warning. I will be spoiling everything to do with Scott Pilgrim, and I would recommend that you at least read the graphic novels before watching this video. With that said and out of the way, let's get started. Created by Brian Lee O'Malley, Scott Pilgrim was a series of 6 graphic novels published under Oni Press, originally running from August 18, 2004, with its first volume Scott Pilgrim's Precious Little Life, to July 20, 2010, with the series finale being Scott Pilgrim's Finest Hour. The original run of the series was in black and white, which reduced the cost of its production. O'Malley drew a lot of inspiration from manga, reading Even a Monkey Can Draw manga by Koji Ahara and Kentaro Takuma, which gives a satirical insight of the manga industry. One manga O'Malley noted specifically was Ranma 1/2 and its character designer, Atsuko Nakajima, who served as a minor influence. The name Scott Pilgrim also came from one of O'Malley's main inspirations, a song by the same name by the Canadian band Plumtree, taking direct inspiration from the lyrics. The novel follows Scott Pilgrim, a 23-year-old Canadian living in Toronto with his gay roommate, Wallace Wells. Scott recently started dating a Chinese-Canadian high school student, Knives Chow, and he plays bass in the band Sex Bomb, alongside his friend Stephen Stills playing the guitar, and Kim Pines playing drums. He eventually becomes romantically involved with the elusive Ramona Flowers, the literal girl of his dreams, by the way. To continue dating Ramona, however, he must defeat the League of Evil Exes, a group assembled with the sole purpose of making her love life a living hell. Got some serious contenders of biggest haters in fiction here. This serves as the main plotline of the comic, and while it's a little weird, it's pretty easy to follow. However, there's lots of room left for downtime in between Scott's clashes with the Evil Exes, where Scott Pilgrim's humorous and witty writing, alongside O'Malley's expressive illustrations, which perfectly convey the characters' emotions, shine. These moments of downtime give the reader insight into these characters' personal lives, fleshing them out and highlighting their dynamic and relationship with the other characters, while also making way for subplots that intertwine with the main story after a while. And while the story does have an overall comedic tone, there are moments in which the story takes itself more seriously. Alongside this serious tone, the story also presents itself in a very mature manner. Of course, it has adult themes like drinking and intimacy, but it also presents its characters in an unbiased fashion, willing to shine them in a not so favorable light, something I'll get to later. All the while, watching O'Malley's art style evolve throughout the series makes the read even more enjoyable. Also, while I already mentioned its witty writing, the comic is actually pretty funny, having multiple panels that had me smiling and laughing, either from the aforementioned dialogue, the art, or the combination of the two. And not only that, but it's also self-aware in a good way. This is assisted by one of the defining traits that I'll reiterate for the rest of the video, its multitude of references to pop culture. Numerous times through the graphic novel's run, video games, comics, and even real-life songs will be mentioned. While they may not add much sometimes to the story, they don't really take away anything either, and sometimes are just nice to see. Another defining trait of the series is of course the main antagonist, the League of Evil Exes. First, there's Matthew Patel, Ramona's first evil ex. She only dated him because he was the only non-white, non-jock kid at her school in the 7th grade. He sent a threatening email and letter to Scott about the League of Evil Exes, which Scott skimmed through. He's a pyromancer and has the ability to summon demon hipster chicks? Scott makes quick work of him. The second evil ex is Lucas Lee, a skating movie star who was involved with Ramona in their freshman year of high school, when he was apparently a whiny little greasy-haired skater, according to Ramona. For the most part, they just sat at the curb and smoked. That was until Ramona cheated on him with her third evil ex. He's a pretty good skater and has superhuman strength, literally throwing Scott into Casa Loma, knocking him unconscious. He's also pretty tame compared to his fellow exes, offering Scott a short break, during which Scott asked him to demonstrate a skateboard trick, which caused him to disintegrate as he rapidly descended down the rail. Evil Ex number 3 is Todd Ingram, who Ramona had an affair with while dating Lucas Lee, after which Todd disappeared for quite some time, reappearing after going on a strict vegan diet, giving him psychic powers. After blasting a crater on the moon to show his love for Ramona, they were eventually forced to split up, as he went off to a vegan college, where he eventually met Scott's ex before Knives and Ramona, Envy Natalie Adams. He acts somewhat as a parallel to Scott, not only dating his previous ex, but also playing bass for her band, The Clash at Demon Head, titled after the NES game of the same name. After a botched race, and the reveal that he was having an affair with Lynette, the drummer of Envy's band, she swiftly kicks him in the balls, and Scott gets assistance by the rival band Crashing the Boys, when eventually, the vegan police strip Todd of his powers due to him cheating on his vegan diet 3 times, giving Scott the opportunity he needed to deliver a fatal headbutt. The fourth evil ex-boyfriend is Roxy Richter, who just so happens to be a girl. She dated Ramona while attending the University of Carolina in the Sky, while Ramona was in a more curious phase of her life, called the sexy phase by Scott. She's an artist and half ninja, wearing roller skates and 2 belts, both having a sword sheath carrying her katanas. Roxy's agile, can disappear into smoke, and can travel through subspace, as apparently she taught Ramona everything she knew. Scott accidentally gets Mr. Chow, Knives Chow's father, who was chasing him for dating his daughter, and Roxy to fight for a bit. Scott had been running away from the two because 1, he doesn't hit girls, and 2, they have swords and he doesn't. After being called a coward by both Roxy and Ramona, Scott confesses his love to Ramona and mans up, gaining a sword of his own, the power of love, which he uses to slice Roxy in half. She ends up exploding into tiny animals, like in the Sonic games. Oh, and Mr. Chow leaves with a good impression of Scott. Next up are the twins Kyle and Ken Katayanaga, Ramona's 5th and 6th evil exes. Ramona dated these two simultaneously, cheating on them with each other. Once they found out, they swore to do everything together from that moment on. Firstly, they're roboticists, sicking 3 different robots on Scott. Robot 01, Toasterhead himself. This second robot they planted at a gig Sexba Bomb landed at Sneaky D's, which Scott ends up breaking his guitar over, and this third larger robot. They eventually kidnap Kim and double team Scott, who's suffering from a hangover after the night he fought their third robot, with Kim having to lie about Ramona to give Scott the motivation he needs to keep fighting. Throughout their appearances in the novel, they continuously brought up the fact that it was in Ramona's nature to run away, either to Ramona herself or to Scott. As I likely made clear through her evil exes, we learn that Ramona may not have been the greatest person, while we also learn the same about Scott. Firstly, Scott starts off the novel without a job, and kinda just mooching off of his friends. Later, we also learn that he wasn't the best in relationships, and even cheated on Knives with Ramona before breaking up with her. Before facing the 7th evil ex, due to Ramona leaving him, Scott becomes atrociously down bad. I'm sorry, that's the only way to explain it. This all comes to a head for Scott when he goes on a wilderness sabbatical, suggested by Wallace, hanging out with Kim, who moved back with her parents, when he clashes with Nega Scott, the embodiment of his past mistakes and the memories of them. While Scott originally wants to kill Nega Scott to forever forget Ramona, with the help of Kim, who tells him that if he doesn't acknowledge his mistakes, he'll keep making them, he embraces Nega Scott, remembering all of his wrongdoings in his past relationships. He then heads to the Chaos Theater, where he comes face to face with the last evil ex, who'd actually have been foreshadowed since the beginning of the story. Now we can talk about the final and 7th evil ex, Gideon Graves. You see, when Scott first met Ramona, after the two initially hit it off following Matthew's defeat, upon mentioning Gideon's name, Ramona's eyes opened wide, with white line described as the glow surrounding her head, while she obviously became a lot more defensive and aggravated. This is because Gideon created the glow, which pushes the infected person's negative emotions to the forefront, something that Ramona had been suffering from since the beginning of the novel. Gideon himself is my favorite of Ramona's exes. That's a weird sentence. He has the ability to alter people's memories, something that had been afflicting Scott since the beginning of the novel, and he specializes in long sword proficiency, like Scott, literally stealing the power of love and using it to kill him, and then later on, using a sword he planted in Envy's dress. We get some insight into his character through his relationship with Envy now that I mention it, as she clearly feels as if he's running her to the ground, while it's shown he obviously doesn't care all that much for her well-being. He's portrayed in a similar manner to Scott actually, thinking of his relationship with Ramona exactly how Scott saw his with Knives before merging with Scott. Scott even gains a stronger sword, the power of understanding, due to this connection he makes. Also, at least to me, he's the funniest of the exes. He also admits that the League of Evil Exes was created because of a drunken rant about Ramona he made on Craigslist. Eventually, after playing literal mind games with Scott and Ramona, the two of them worked together to defeat him. Honestly, after reading the graphic novels for the first time for this video, I enjoyed them a lot more than I thought I would. And seeing how you just watched me talk about it in length, if you haven't read them already, go do yourself a favor and do it. There's still a lot of stuff that I didn't cover or go into detail about on purpose. The series deservingly won several awards. In 2005, O'Malley won the Doug Wright Award for Best Emerging Talent due to the first volume. In 2006, he was awarded Outstanding Canadian Comic Book Cartoonist in the Joe Shuster Awards. In 2007, he won the Harvey Award. And lastly, in 2010, O'Malley won his first Eisner Award for the Best Humor Publication because of Scott Pilgrim vs. the Universe. Of course, just like any piece of media that gets popular, there comes with many adaptations of the source material. Produced, written, and directed by Edgar Wright, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World was released on August 13, 2010, and is a romantic action comedy based on the graphic novels. Its cast includes Michael Cera as Scott, Mary Elizabeth Winstead as Ramona, Ellen Wong as Knives Chow, Chris Evans as Lucas Lee, and the list literally goes on. While the movie had a total budget of $85 million, and only returned to $47.7 million, it's honestly one of the best movies I've seen, and has gained a cult following over the years. It adapts scenes from the comics very nicely, with the first half of the movie being the most accurate to the graphic novels, which makes sense, seeing how the movie was in production before the series was even completed. It lives up to its weird blend of genres perfectly, of course being a plot founded on romance, with its eccentric visuals taking inspiration from manga and video games, specifically 16-bit games, and genuinely funny jokes and moments.
Is Scott here?
You know what? He just left.
Really?
Yeah. Sorry.
The movie also has a visual flair to it unseen and unmatched by anything of its time. It's honestly a visual spectacle, most noticeable in the movie's multiple fight scenes. The movie doesn't shy away from using dynamic shots or cutaways either. The sound design also plays a crucial part in the movie, making use of video game sound effects like this chime from Zelda, or the ring sound effect from the Sonic games.
Meaning of the word.
The sound design can also not only lead itself into the comedy of the movie,
We dumped Kim.
Okay, me and Kim are all good now, alright?
but also the comic book aesthetic of the movie as well. Another thing to the movie's benefit is that while the story of Scott Pilgrim always took place in Toronto, the movie is able to take full advantage of that fact, being filmed in Toronto. It features noteworthy locations like the Toronto Public Library, Casa Loma, St. Michael's College School, and more. Music plays a pivotal role in the film, just like it does to the original Scott Pilgrim story. I mean, the Katayanaga twins are actually Japanese pop stars in this adaptation. Wright and sound producer Nigel Godrich actually ended up spending 2 whole years scouting for each fictional band. Eventually, the movie had contributions from the producer Nigel Godrich, Radiohead, Beck, Metric, Broken Social Scene, Cornelius, Dan the Automator, Kid Koala, and David Campbell. In return, this not only gives each band their own style, but also each song. Although the movie can be seen as a box office flop, as previously mentioned, it's gained a cult following over the years, and it received overall positive reviews from critics back in its heyday. Later, on November 9th for North America and December 27, 2010 for the UK, the movie was released on DVD and Blu-ray. The DVD included 4 audio commentaries and 21 deleted, extended, and alternative scenes, including the original ending of the movie, where Scott ended up with Knives instead of Ramona. Here are some of my favorite bloopers.
Scott, if your life had a face, I would punch it.
Yeah, wait, what? Well, she's totally jealous of you.
Anybody's jealous. How about that?
Yeah. How about that?
We're still going to the after party, right?
I'm not sure there's gonna be much of a party. I think a third of the band.
The Blu-ray edition not only included everything the DVD had, but also 6 featurettes, or shorter films, production blogs, trailers and TV spots, a digital copy of the film, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the Animation, an animated short that played on Adult Swim that covered Scott and Kim's history, adapted from the second volume. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, was first released in North America on August 10, 2010, internationally releasing on the 30th of the same month for PlayStation Network and Xbox Live Arcade. It's a 4-player beat-em-up that was meant to tie in with the movie, inspired by classics like TMNT and Time, developed by Ubisoft Montreal and Chengdu, published by Ubisoft as well. It loosely follows the plot of the graphic novels, and had 5 playable characters upon release. Those characters were Scott and Ramona, of course, Scott's bandmates Kim and Wallace, and Nega Scott, who acts as an unlockable character upon completing the game with all the other characters. Everyone starts at level 1, earning experience and money by damaging and KOing enemies. Upon leveling up, the character will not only get full health back, but will gain new abilities, like an attack that can hit enemies on the floor, a dive kick, or even a counter. There's also 4 stats separate from the character's level. There's defense, which makes you take less damage and increases your health. Speed, which accelerates your movement, your attack speed, and your recovery. Strength, which makes your attack stronger while increasing the speed and distance of things thrown. Lastly is willpower, increasing your guts, a unique stat that allows you to call for a unique assist based on your character, while refilling your health if you lose it all. While the characters start off pretty slow with a lackluster move list and low stats, over the course of the game, they'll continue to learn new actions through leveling up, and getting stronger by purchasing items and food, which are used to recover health and can be taken on the go to save yourself. You can also pick up and attack with items, or even down enemies, throwing them once they've fulfilled their purpose. Enemies can do the same thing, and this can add a little bit of spice to the experience, as long as you aren't catching swords to the face, Wavy! There's also an abundance of video game references, just like the graphic novel, like Kim riding a star similar to how Kirby does, or the fact that you can straight up buy an E-tank in the last stage. The game also has a few cheat codes to drive home that retro feel, like one called Noble Sacrifice, which can be done by holding the jump button, pressing up twice, then down twice, and then left right, and briefly holding the block button will make coins totaling up to $50 appear. The game isn't too long, having 7 pretty lengthy levels, accompanied by an absolutely amazing soundtrack provided by Anamanaguchi. The soundtrack, just like the game's style, was heavily commended at the time of release, with IGN stating that it's possibly the best soundtrack on PS3, though diverse levels and varieties of enemies also serve to amplify the game's unique style as well. However, the game wasn't without its faults. The game can be pretty difficult later on, making grinding in the latter half of the game a near necessity to keep up with foes, and the lack of online and drop-in co-op was also something held against the game. While the game already made for a great package, it eventually got some pretty cool DLC. To coincide with the release of the DVD and Blu-ray disc release of the movie, an additional 2 game modes were added, Battle Royale and Dodgeball, alongside drop-in co-op and Knives Chow as a fully playable character. And later, on March 12, 2013, a second DLC pack was added, adding online co-op and Wallace Wells as a playable character. However, on December 30th, 2014, the game and its DLC would be delisted from both the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3 stores due to its license expiring. Because of this, the only way to play the game at the time was if you already had the game purchased and downloaded on your system, or through an emulator. Ever since 2016, Brian Lee O'Malley stated his #1 goal was to get the Scott Pilgrim game back up. As both the movie and game's 10th anniversary began approaching, something special, and something I personally never thought would happen, happened. The game got a re-release. Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, the game, Complete Edition, was released on January 14th, 2021, and is the original game in all its glory, while also being pre-packaged with all the DLC and benefits it brought with them, making it the definitive version of the game. Not only that, but on the day of release, Anamanaguchi did a live stream covering the entire game's soundtrack. If you're a fan of the game's music, you should watch it. You'll really enjoy it. The movie wasn't left out of this 10th anniversary love either. Their first was a reunion of the cast in May, released on July 20th, 2020, that brought together most of the many actors and actresses who played a hand in the movie's charm, with Edgar White also being present. During this reunion, they did a table read of the script, creating Scott Pilgrim vs. the World Water Crisis, serving as a fundraiser for the Water for People charity. You can watch it on YouTube, linked below, just like the Anamanaguchi stream, or on Netflix. Secondly, it was made apparent that the movie would be re-released not only in theaters, but also that its release would be in 4K. Also, on May 20th, the Academy of Motion Pictures held a watch party for the film. Well, that concludes the Scott Pilgrim retrospective. Thank you so much for watching this long. I honestly appreciate it more than you could imagine. Two people I'd like to give a special thanks to are Wavy Nimbus and James. You two made getting footage for the game 10 times more enjoyable than if I were to do it myself. Thank you so much for watching. I really mean that. Have a great rest of your day.